Well, good day, everyone. Today, I've got a very special guest. I'm really, really excited. And she's got more than 40 years of experience doing astrology. And we have Arielle Guttman with me today. So, hello, Arielle.
Hi. Hi, everybody.
So today we are actually talking about the upcoming Capricorn VenusStarPoint that will form on the 8th of January of 2022, and it will last for a good 9.5 months. And then something very important will happen at around 22nd of October of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's going to be a very important star point, I would say, because I've already done the 2022 forecasts for the world, and it's not a particularly great year, I must admit. And with this star point, actually, I would ask you, what do you think of this upcoming star point? Yeah.
Of the Libra one or the Capricorn
the
one?
Capricorn one. Yeah, the immediate one that's forming soon.
We always have restrictions in Capricorn. We always have a lot of things happening with the world, the economy, the political leadership, the changing of the guard, so to speak. It's Capricorn. It's about power, worldly power, and it also has to do with the fact that the Venus retrograde cycle is conjunct Pluto in Capricorn for this one. So we have Capricorn, which is a sign governed by Saturn, and then we have to really, kind of give it its strength, and then we have Pluto conjunct the Venus retrograde cycle 3 times. So I think we're in for a lot of shifts and changes and more restrictions, and kind of hold on for what's going to happen here, because
testing
we
our
don't
patience.
have control over what's going to happen.
It's like testing our patience, right? With all this suppressive retrograde energy. And if I do recall, Saturn will be still squaring Uranus in 2022.
Yeah, a little bit. Mm-hmm.
And then it's either one of those 2 planets or both planets will be highlighted by eclipses that's in 2022. So even more supply chain disruptions globally. And
they still haven't figured out COVID yet. They still haven't figured out what it is, what it caused it, where it really came from, and how to deal with it. They don't really have too many answers. And so they keep saying what they say because it's the best answer they have, but it may not be the real answer. So we're still kind of, with Neptune and Pisces still, we're still kind of fishing around in the dark, believing or not believing. And that's really where the world is at right now. It's like, the leaders can do what they want, but the people of the world are not just blindly following them like they used to. I think now there's this sort of, well, I don't know if I believe that or not. And so that's a lot of Neptune and Pisces, which we still have a little time to go on that. Neptune's still got a few years more in Pisces. So it's a little bit, it's still a lot of confusion.
You reckon we are living right in the midst of a twilight zone?
Yeah,
kind of.
That's a good way to put it.
Like Neptune and Pisces. So do you have any slides to share to kind of acquaint with the audience regarding the all about the star points that's coming?
Sure, I do. I can share my screen with you. And whoops, let's go back to beginning. Here we go. Are you seeing it?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, You know, the Venus star point is a term that I created based on the 5-pointed star, which is a pattern that Venus and the Earth orbit together in as they go around the sun. And so when you hear the term Venus star point, it's different than your natal Venus. It's not at all, it may have nothing to do with your natal Venus. In some cases, it will have to do with your natal Venus because you might be born close to the star point date where your Venus and your sun and your star point are all in the same sign. But typically that's not the case. For most people, their star point is something completely different. And if you hear the term Venus star point, what people are referring to is what point you were born on or what point we are currently in, for instance, on the Venus star in terms of her slow orbit around the wheel, around the zodiac wheel. And Capricorn is the next one. It's coming right up. It's coming up January 8th, and it will be in effect from January 2022 all the way to October of 2022. So it's usually about 9 months, about 9.5 months actually, that every star point, the length of every star point. And I like to think of those periods as periods to focus on that particular sign by looking at the house it's in your own chart, where it is, you know, what house does it occupy? If it's in your 10th house, you're very focused on your career and worldly things and responsibilities. If it's in your 4th house, you may be more focused on what's going on in your home life. And if it's in your 1st house, there's a lot of self-interest, new beginnings. What do you want to do? How do you want to embark on something new in your life? If it's in the 7th house, you're thinking about partnership, either the one you're in currently, or if you're not in one, you know, would you like to be in one, and how to make that happen, how to connect with not just one person, but other people in general. And every house has its own kind of, you know, way of being emphasized during a Venus star point period. So that's the first thing I would do, is in knowing that it's in Capricorn this year. And then, okay, where does it fall and how does it aspect my planets? And it happens to be at 18 degrees Capricorn. And that's an important degree too. So I'll actually show you another slide that deals with the 18 degrees.
I just realized something. 8 years ago, because star points occur in the same sign, in the same phase every 8 years.
Right.
And the last time it happened was 2013, late 2013 to early 2014.
Right.
In January 2014, that's when the star point actually formed. I actually bought the place I'm living in right now.
Okay.
It happened.
Well, that's an important kind of thing to consider, because it is an 8-year cycle. And so you may be looking at what did you do in December, like November and December of 2013, Venus was in Capricorn for an elongated period and during her retrograde, also in January and February of 2014. So what was going on in your life then that is either repeating now, or you are cycling out of now and going into a new level of, but it is the start of a new Capricorn period. And, you know, how do you want to go to that next level now? So it does work in 8-year increments. So it's always good, especially when Venus is retrograde, she's ending a cycle. She's really ending a 1.6-year cycle in her 5-pointedness, because her last retrograde was 1.6 years ago in Gemini, June of 2020. So you're wrapping up an 8-year cycle from 2013 and 14, but you're also wrapping up a 1.6-year cycle that began in June of 2020, and you're going into the next StarPoint phase right now. So those are two dates to keep in mind. Venus, of course, has always been portrayed as this beautiful goddess floating to the shore from the east, from the Far East. She was actually Aphrodite, born in Cyprus, or came from Cyprus, but the Greeks pretty much brought her into the Greek pantheon and named her Aphrodite. She wasn't called Aphrodite in Cyprus. She was a Kypros. She was a Cypriot goddess that came from even further in the east, possibly Syria, possibly, you know, in the Babylonian, Assyrian culture, the Hittite. They all had fertility goddesses, love goddesses, fertility goddesses, but she's gone through the centuries and through the civilizations as the same principle, but being named in the new culture for a different name. We know her as Venus, and this is one of the iconic images of Venus for us in the modern world because of the painting made famous by Botticelli, a Renaissance painter, Botticelli, who from her myth of her birth of Homer, Hesiod, who said she came floating from the east across the sea on a shell, and she was clothed by the seasons, and she was shuttled up to Mount Olympus and made one of the gods, one of the primary 12 Olympians of the Greek pantheon. But so that's our myth, and our myth also described her as being a goddess of harmony and a goddess of beauty, a goddess of love, a goddess of refinement, all the arts, things like that, pleasure, arts, refinement, you know, more or less gentle and soft and all of that. But Venus actually has two sides. She is that one side. She has that side to her. There is no other planet that really embodies all those qualities like Venus does. But she also has a harder side to her and a more severe side too. The ancients actually saw her in two different phases and called her both a love goddess and a war goddess. So she has two distinct phases. The love goddess tends to relate to the evening star Venus, and the warrior goddess tends to relate to the morning star Venus. And this is a pattern of the Earth Venus coming around in 8 cyclical orbits. This is a computer generated graphic, and you can see from this beautiful 5-petaled flower in the inside, but all of the unfolding petals of the flower are like a rose. And she has been called a rose, and the rose, of course, has been associated with Venus. And I think all flowers are associated with Venus, but this is one you could definitely say. And also, when two people fall in love, or in the olden times when a suitor was trying to capture the hand of the object of his desire, he would hand her a rose. He would bring her, and even today we buy bouquets of roses to give to people we love. So it is a Venus associated flower more than the others. But this is a flower I really love that's associated with Venus. All flowers have a Venusian quality and essence, but this is the morning glory. And because Venus was also called the morning star when she was in the morning sky, I think this flower is particularly suited to Venus, especially with that pentagram on the inside, because, you know, Venus is our 5-pointed lady. She is our 5-pointed star, our pentagram in her orbit and everything about her. So this is I thought this was a beautiful pattern with showing the Venus pattern right within this flower. Now, how does that look in the zodiac? When we put it against the backdrop of the 12 signs of the zodiac, we actually see that here are the 5 points of our current time period right now. And I want to show you how this is formed. So every 1.6 years, there is a retrograde of Venus. And that's the end of one period of Venus before she goes into the next period. And as I said, 1.6 years ago, in June of 2020, we had a Gemini retrograde of Venus. And it was right in the middle of Gemini, and the star point happened at about 13 Gemini. And here we are. She went, Venus travels all the way around the wheel once, and then another 0.6 around the wheel to make number 2. So now we're in the next retrograde of Capricorn. And that's where it will be starting in about another week or so, week or 10 days. She goes retrograde in Capricorn. She'll spend 40 days in retrograde, which is her average, 41 days. She will be retrograde, but her star point will be at 18 degrees of Capricorn. That star point being, again, the conjunction of the Sun and Venus in the middle of her retrograde period. When she leaves Capricorn, finally, in early March, she will go travel all the way around the wheel again, 1 year, and then she will go another 0.6 way around, 0.6 years around, and she will wind up at her next retrograde in Leo, not until August of 2023. And so as you can see, this is how the Venus star pattern works, and takes it a year and another 0.6 around, and then by 2024 in April, she'll be in Aries again, and then 1 whole year and 0.6 again later. She won't be in Scorpio, she'll be in Libra, but she will be in Scorpio by 2024, but she's on the cusp right now between Libra and Scorpio. She's shifting back and forth. So that's a little confusing, but she's actually down here now. So I just wanted to show the mechanics of the Venus star and how that actually works. Also, 1.6 is an important number in mathematics because 1.6 is related to the Fibonacci sequence. It's related to the golden section or the golden mean. It's also the Greek letter phi or phi, which is also has a very special vibration to it. It has to do with art and design and beauty and harmony, either in the environment or in a composition you are creating, or in a certain style that you are wearing, or a certain way that you are putting your environment together, the aesthetics in your environment. So it is harmony and beauty, and it is something distinctly very Venusian.
So Arielle, do you reckon that every 1.6 years when Venus stays in a sign for like a whole 4 months, literally, is really the golden opportunity for us to birth and rebirth our Venusian principles?
Yeah. Venus in astrology is connected to the houses and the signs that talk about values. I mean, the Libra part of Venus is usually relationship and love. The Taurus part of Venus is possessions and wealth and self-worth and what we have and what we possess within ourselves. I always think of a Venus, that long-term Venus retrograde cycle, as you mentioned, it stays in a sign. Sometimes it'll cover 2 signs in its retrograde, it'll go up to the next sign and then come back. But in this case, and also in Gemini's case, the 2020 Gemini stayed in Gemini the whole time for 4 months or 4.5 months. The Capricorn one will do the same. So I think it's important, but the next one that we have, Aries is actually, because it's such a low degree of Aries, it's gonna go back all the way into Pisces and come, you know, it's sort of previewing the Pisces star point that's still about 20 years away from where we are now. But yeah, it's an excellent time to do a self review. That's what Venus retrogrades are about. It's like pulling back, reflecting on our values, and also how we are valued in the world, how we are valued by other people, how we value ourselves, and how what is happening in our exterior world matching what we are feeling on the inside. It's a time to really kind of sync those two principles together.
So do you reckon that with this Capricorn Venus star point, there's a morning star forming, that a lot of people will be rethinking about their careers?
Probably with Capricorn career, yeah. I've actually been talking to a lot of people recently, you probably have too, Donny, that are really, really not happy with their jobs. Right. And yet they are afraid. We're still in the time of COVID, and you know, the economic situations of the world aren't particularly promising right now. So people are on one hand a bit afraid to leave their job, but on the other hand really not happy with it. So I think this is something that will come up during this cycle for sure.
I do have the message of like people need to pivot their way if it's not working for them, because the ruler of that Capricorn Venus star point is Saturn, and it keeps squaring Uranus. So it's like when I see Saturn Uranus square, I think of the word pivot.
Yeah.
A lot, yeah. So people have to realize that they have to be flexible and just run with it. Don't let the Saturnian fear get to you. Or at least try. I know it's hard.
Capricorn is also a sign that deals with authority, and it's time to really step into your own authority and not be afraid to take a stand, and to not only value yourself for what you're putting out, but also to value others. If you are the administrator of the company or the boss or whatever, and there are people working under you, it's really a good time to respect them and honor them and appreciate them, because you might lose them if you don't. This is a time, if they're not honored, they're gonna walk away. So it's a time to kind of appreciate the relationships you have in your life or whatever, and also come to terms with, you know, okay, what's working, what's not working, you know?
Yeah. I always think about Capricorn Venus star point as, what do you value? Do you want to be the CEO of your own destiny or otherwise? Yeah. It's got that vibration to me when I look at Capricorn VSP. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I just had showed the 5 points of the current star that we're in, but this is an interesting thing because the Venus star is a very long cycle. It takes a long time for it to even pass through one of its 5 signs on the star point. It generally stays in a sign for 100 years, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but its average is 100 years through a sign. So these are very long cycles involving the Venus star. And you can see here, here's a 40-year pattern of how the star goes, you know, Gemini, Capricorn, Leo, Aries, Scorpio, back to Gemini. And then 8 years later, Capricorn again, Leo, Aries, Scorpio, Gemini. And it only moves in that 8 years at 1 or 2 degrees. clockwise on the zodiac. So that's a very long time. It's staying hovering. I call it the heartbeat. This is a cosmic heartbeat, sort of pounding on a certain degree, a certain sign, a certain planet, if you have one there in your chart. And it's like an awakening. It's like that flower, Venus, the Venus star, when it is repeating for a long time, that same degree, it's an awakening. It's a very big awakening. You know, so anything you might have around 18 degrees Capricorn right now, it's kind of an important point to be really aware of. So that's the 40-year pattern. Over here, you see the 100-year pattern and how it takes almost a whole 100 years to go 30 degrees, you know, from one sign to the next. The signs don't all change. The star signs don't all change at the same time. Generally speaking, when a star sign changes, that's a big event, because we've had 100 years of Scorpio, for instance, and now we're going to be going into 100 years of Libra. So that is a big shift. Sometimes in a period, in a single decade, you'll have 2 star points changing. The last time that happened was in the 1980s. In the 1980s, we had the Aquarius star terminate and the Capricorn star began. And also the Virgo star terminated and the Leo star began. So these are what are like star mates, you know, Aquarius to Virgo and Capricorn to Leo, because they came in together and they will phase out together. Scorpio and Aries are also star mates because they came in together in the 1920s. Right around the end of the 20s and early 30s, they came in together, and they are also phasing out pretty similarly, because as soon as Scorpio phases out and goes to Libra, it will be followed by, not too long after, Aries phasing out and going into Pisces. So these are what we call star mates. And it's a more advanced part of learning about the Venus star cycle, because after all, Venus is a relationship goddess or planet. And so you would expect that there would be some very strong relationship connections on the Venus star. I'm not going to talk too much about that today. I just kind of want to talk more about the Capricorn star, but I think Donny will be able to follow up with you later about the relationship patterns on the star, right?
Sure.
So as I was saying before, these are the Venus transits to the sign. These are the signs, of course, that are affecting right now, these 5 signs. And this is about to come. The Scorpio star point started in 1926, and the last one will be in 2026, ending in 2027. So that's a good, that's almost a perfect 100 years of Scorpio star. And then it switches to Libra. Libra, the scales, 2022 is when it begins. There's an overlap in the 2020s. That's why I think the 2020s is kind of a interesting decade. The whole decade is a decade of transition. I've talked about this before in some of my other topics and talks, where we really are in a very big transitional period right now, saying goodbye to a world that existed and saying hello to a world that we haven't entered yet. And so we're kind of crossing a bridge, a really big bridge to another world. And we don't really know anything about that world yet, but we're going there anyway. We're being taken there.
Well, it's the point of no return, right? It's just one road forward. Yeah.
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 It is. And you can kind of see that already. I mean, we didn't know exactly how it would be happening, but I think having a world pandemic has put a lot of new laws into place and restrictions. And there are certain things that we'll never go back to like we had before. It's possible that we're just going to have to say goodbye to certain things that we took for granted before. And it's sort of like, maybe we didn't appreciate them as much when we had them. Maybe they're gone now. Maybe they will come back, but I think in some ways, a lot of things will not come back.
Yeah, I agree.
This is another way to look at the cosmic heartbeat, the Venus synchronization mechanism, easy to say, right? Is these five degrees that are actually in effect right now: 21 Leo from 2019, 13 Gemini from 2020, 6 Aries from this year, 18 Capricorn starting in 22, and 29 Libra also in 22. So these are 5 pretty important degrees for you to look at on your own chart when you get a moment to study that. And this, so of course, everybody wonders, where is my Venus star point? And this is a PDF that you can download from my website at sophiavenus.com. It's the Find Your Venus Star Point PDF. A lot of people have it on their phones and take it with them when they go. And the trick to this is that there's always 2 dates about 9.5 months apart. And most likely you're going to be born between those 2 dates. So you always look at the date preceding your birth, because it's a star point that came just before you were born, not necessarily after you were born, though that one's an important one too for you. But as far as your star point, you would go previous to it. And then you can look up your date. And these ribbons, these colored ribbons, are just the 5 different points of the star and what's in effect at any given time. I think this table goes from 1870 all the way up to 2050 or 2060. So it covers a good amount of time for you to look at yourself and your family and your relatives and ancestors and so forth. So what does the Venus star point say for Capricorn for 2022? The year begins with Venus kissing the sun in Capricorn. I had to ask, well, what kind of kiss would that be? A Capricorn kiss means getting some work done. You've set some goals. Capricorn wants to excel by doing what you do best and finding a supreme sense of satisfaction there. So again, check the house that Capricorn occupies to see where you will feel that drive. And of course, Venus is retrograde at this star point. It's not always retrograde at every star point. It's retrograde at every other star point. So the last star point we had right before this was Aries, early 2021 in March. It was direct then, Venus was. And from that came the evening star. When she makes her star point in retrograde, from that comes the morning star. So there's 2 aspects of Venus, the dual aspect of the morning star and the evening star. And they alternate. You'll find on that table as well, you'll always see MS, ES, MS, ES, whether you're a morning or whether you're an evening star. This one's pretty intense because in her retrograde, she will meet up with Pluto 3 times. And Pluto is the god of the underworld. It can have some very surprising and sometimes even shocking events that happen that suddenly wake us up to a reality that we hadn't been quite prepared for. It can be the loss of something. Often Pluto takes something away. That will return later, but at the moment it's taking something away or seeming to take something away. It's often about separation before reunification. And so it's not happening just in our personal lives, it's happening on the political front too in the world. So I'm looking at a lot of things out there in the world, in the mundane world, that have the potential of coming apart.
You know, when I see Venus kissing Pluto 3 times, it reminds me of that expose of what's that trial? The Ghislaine Maxwell trial going on right now.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of of a Venus-Pluto retrograde.
Take down the patriarchal, the Capricorn, right? Yeah.
And, you know, Pluto exposes things that we haven't seen, things that we don't want to see, things that we really don't want to know. But of course, everybody does want to know.
Well, it's very salacious, yeah.
Yeah.
In that aspect, or sensation.
It's like we want to know, we don't want to know.
Yeah. Because when you get to know, there's this kind of like, it could potentially paint a bad taste in your mouth, like with all the disgust or whatever that goes on as well. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's how things in the collective actually, what's going on in the world actually can mirror what's happening in the planets. This as above, so below kind of mirroring that takes place with many things in astrology. But here we are at the Venus retrograde kissing Pluto 3 times, and we have that trial going on, which is so Plutonian and involves Venus and Pluto, you know.
And there's a lot of shady arrangements, if I'm not wrong, regarding that trial. So a lot of things are being like shielded from the public.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing I wanted to mention was that it is 18 degrees, Capricorn, the star point, but 18 itself is a powerful degree this year. The sun, the VSP, Sun, Venus, and the VSP will occur at 18 Capricorn. Capricorn's guardian planet is Saturn. It turns direct at 18 Aquarius later this year. Both signs are governed by Saturn, therefore Saturn has ultimate authority this year. And the nodes sit on 18 Taurus and Scorpio for the first 10 days of August, while Uranus is at a stationary retrograde for 3 whole months in the summer, August, September, October. So we have a lot going on there. Anybody that has 18 degrees, I talked to somebody the other night who has her moon at 18 degrees Capricorn in the 6th house. And the basic thing she said right now was she is so burned out because she's caretaking so many people right now. The responsibility is totally on her shoulders for a number of people, including in her personal life and in her professional life. Of course, Capricorn is responsibility, and the moon often is caretaking or nurturing those, you know, other people. And it's in her 6th house of service. In Capricorn, she's the one that everybody's looking to for help, shouldering a lot of responsibility. So it's quite clear how, that was the basis of our conversation, was about, okay, how are we going to deal? This is what's coming, you know what's coming, but, you know, how do you take care of yourself during a period like this?
So there's a lot of emphasis on 18 degrees then, you would say.
Yeah.
Of a sign.
Yeah. So, you know, the Capricorn star only came in 1986, so it's a young star. It hasn't been around that long yet. It's just starting to get people to come of age who were Capricorn stars. When I was researching the material for the book, and I started the research in 2004, the star wasn't even 20 years old yet. So there were young kids, there were little kids, and we didn't even know who these Capricorn star points were. I had no data to really go on, but now we have a lot more We have Donny has a lot of examples in the young celebrity culture that are Capricorn star points, which now we can see how they're acting and who these people are. But you can see this is how all the star points work. Basically, they'll go from evening star, and then 4 years later, morning star. 4 years later, evening star. 4 years later, morning star. It's still Venus cazimi with the sun, but every 4 years it alternates. And where we are right now is 2018. It was 18 degrees Capricorn, the same degree, but it was an evening star. This year it's 18 degrees, but it's a morning star, inferior or interior conjunction. So 18 degrees has been around since 18 Capricorn has actually been a strong, active, sensitive degree since 2018. So you could think back to 2018 even to see, 4 years ago, okay, what did that activate in your life if you have an 18-degree planet there? And what's it emphasizing now? What's it eliminating from your life, or what's it building up to the next level? Here's some Capricorn keywords. Probably if you're into astrology, you know most of these words already, but I wanted to really emphasize the idea of giving credit where credit is due, because that's a very sensitive point with Capricorn. The person in charge they may be a little bit heavy-handed in terms of the law, the ruling and the law, but at the same time, they're working hard to do something. And so basically, we want to give credit where it's due. Also, Capricorn being governed by Saturn, it has to do with the laws of time. And you may be feeling a little more pressured in this time period to get things done. Because you feel like, okay, I don't have enough time. It's also a sign of boundaries, but it's important to have personal boundaries during this point in time. And it's an empire builder. I will show you some examples of some charts a little bit later down the line to show how that plays out, because in the last Capricorn StarPoint period 150 years ago, there were quite a bit of people born that really built the world empires as we know them today. This is our actual chart for the Capricorn Star 2022 StarPoint. Here's the sun at 18 Capricorn, Venus at 18 Capricorn, both the same degree and minute of the sign. They're conjunct the goddess, asteroid goddess Juno, goddess of marriage and partnership. I think there will be a lot of thinking about if you are married or partnered with anybody, any kind of partnership. But if you're in partnership with anybody, you are going to want to deepen that partnership, or you are going to want to explore ways of going to new levels with it, expanding it, doing other things, so to speak. And because Pluto is involved in the Venus retrograde cycle with Juno and the Venus StarPoint, there may be some power issues in the relationship that need addressing as well. So you are going to want to see, are we balanced in power? Are we balanced in how we're sharing, what our resources are economically? Is it balanced? Are we, happy with how all of that is coming out? I do feel that since the United States is experiencing a Pluto return for the first time ever in its history this year in 2022, that because the US Pluto is right at about 26, 27 degrees of Capricorn, And here is Pluto for the first time in 250 years, or 200, whatever it is, in its history, to be contacting the degree it was at when the nation was first formed. And so the United States itself is going through a very, very heavy period right now in this transition of out with the old, in with the new, but we don't know where things are at all at the moment. It's also sextile Neptune in Pisces, and Athena, the goddess Athena, Pallas Athena in Pisces, this StarPoint period. Now that's a very creative signature. Pallas and Neptune in 18 and 20 Pisces is full of imagination and skilled craftsmanship and artistry and design and all of that. So I think if you are inclined towards creativity and so forth, that will be part of it as well.
I see it as grounding a vision, that Capricorn and Pisces relationship.
Yeah, a vision. Yeah, Neptune's like a vision. Yeah.
With Pallas, you gotta strategize.
Yeah.
And Juno gotta stick with it. Stick it
Yeah.
out.
Right.
Then something
Exactly.
nice will happen. Yeah.
I mean, we could go through this whole chart to see what the period's going to be like, but I'm focusing mainly on the star point itself and the aspects it's making to other planets. We could also look at Saturn, because Saturn's the one who governs Capricorn. So how is Saturn playing out in the chart? And it, as you said before, it's still in a pretty tight square to Uranus, not exact, but it's moving on, it's moving out, but it's still in range, it's still in orb. And so we have Saturn and Uranus still creating a bit of uncertainty and a shift in the
supply chain
force, so to speak. And the moon's in Aries, conjunct Chiron. So we're still dealing with the pandemic and a lot of personal healing and a lot of collective healing and a lot of questions about that, you know.
And Mercury is also tied up with Saturn, so a lot more information censorship by the technocrats.
Yeah, that's
Oof,
a good point
okay.
too. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So more of the same then, but it's even more harsh then.
Right.
Yeah, this coming VSP.
Exactly. Okay, and next, here's some Capricorn star points of the current era and the past previous era. We have Dakota and Ella Fanning, sisters, both really good actors, and they were born 4 years apart. As you can see, they're both Capricorn star points. Dakota, this is the older one, born in 1994. She's an evening star. And her younger sister, Elle, 1998, is Morning Star. Dakota, this is the older one, and this is the younger one. Then we have twin stars, Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson, of the Twilight series fame. He's the elder one, 1986, Evening Star. She's 1990, 4 years later, the Morning Star. But these are called twin stars. When you have somebody born 4 years apart, 8 years apart, even 12 years, 16 years apart of the same star point sign, you're called twin stars. And that's a very special, tight relationship between two people. We have Malia Obama, born 1998, Morning Star. This is the daughter of President Obama and Michelle Obama. And the stars of the previous era, this is why I talked about empire building, because 5 of the first 7 US presidents were born with a Capricorn star point. which I found pretty astounding because they built the country, the United States, right from the beginning. And Queen Victoria and Prince Albert of the UK were also born as Capricorn twin stars. And, you know, their influence in the UK was, you know, went around the world and lasted for a long, long time. And they are considered, you know, very solid sovereigns, very solid sovereigns in their time. But they were also twin stars. And of course, she adored her husband and he, her. They had a wonderful relationship. And I don't know, a lot of descendants, a lot of children, grandchildren, etc. There's a lot of films. I think this is what is so interesting to me about the 250-year StarPoint return, because if you turn the wheel on the 5 star points, and let's say the head of one of the star points becomes the arm, and that arm becomes the leg, and the leg becomes the other leg, and you rotate it around 1/5 of the way around the circle, that's 250 years. And there are so many things that have come back from that period of 250 years ago of the Capricorn star point. And that has to do with, first of all, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. There have been many films that have come out in miniseries and stage plays and so forth about Queen Victoria in the last decade. Young Victoria, streaming on Netflix. There's a lot of, on our PBS channel, there's a public broadcasting network. There's a lot of films and docuseries, documentaries, and miniseries about Queen Victoria and Prince Albert and their whole reign. And this is the return of that star point from 250 years ago. The same with these, some of these presidents. I'll show you in a moment. I have another slide on that. We had 5 of our first 7 presidents of the United States were Capricorn evening stars, all of them evening stars, all of them Capricorn. The second president was John Adams, and the third president was Thomas Jefferson. Now, the first president was George Washington, who was a Scorpio star point, and the United States itself is a Scorpio star point. So the first president matched the country. They were twin stars. And because the Venus cycle takes 250 years, which is exactly what a Pluto transit takes, a Pluto cycle, the United States is not just getting a Pluto return, it's getting a whole Venus star point return as well. So there's a whole lot of reorganization. And we can see history repeating itself because prior, well, just after the country was founded, we had Alexander Hamilton come into the country and became the first Treasury Secretary of the US. And one whole Venus star cycle later, the Broadway musical Hamilton premiered to record-breaking audiences. And I love it because it was, the logo for the musical itself is a 5-pointed star. Accident? I don't know.
Uncanny? Yeah.
And this is a picture that most of us recognize from the American currency. This is on the $10 bill, and Alexander Hamilton's face is on the $10 bill, and the $10 bill is quite a common currency that's exchanged all the time. And while we still have currency, we actually don't know, as we're going into the new cycle after the Scorpio star period ends, I doubt if we'll actually be using that kind of money anymore. That's kind of my hunch, but we'll see.
You think we'll be switching to central bank digital currency? Like,
well, you know, Uranus is in Taurus, so it's changing things around too. A lot of people, a lot of astrologers have talked about the whole a boom in the cryptocurrency market, but Uranus is in Taurus. It's still very unstable. It's up and down. You don't know where it's going to be tomorrow. It hasn't taken hold yet. So it could be partly cryptocurrency. It could partly be just another way of using your resources, your bank account, your bank card, instead of even having a credit card. Now we have credit cards and you just put it on a reader and it automatically reads the information and charges you. There'll probably be the next level of that. Maybe you won't even need a card. Maybe it'll be just a code on your phone or something. I don't know. It will exactly what form it will take, but I do think that currency is most likely a thing of the past. And we talked about the historical cycles of the Venus star, and I think what's important to know right now is that we are in a decade of a changing star point from Scorpio to Libra, right? And next decade will be in a changing star point from Aries into Pisces. And so we're going to start feeling this shift, collectively, globally, this shift from Scorpio and Aries, which are two Mars-ruled signs, to Libra and Pisces, which both have associations with Venus. And for that, I've always been very hopeful. That because I think we are in a very overly, heavily ruled Mars society right now, in terms of how the star point, the 5 points of the star, 3 of them are Mars associated. We have Scorpio, we have Aries, and we have Capricorn, where Mars is exalted. So even though it's a Venus star point, there are no Venus signs on the current star, no Venus at all whatsoever. It's Mars, Mercury, Saturn, Sun, and Saturn again with Mars.
So more of that divine feminine energy will anchor in over the next 2 decades.
Yeah. People have been talking about the rebirth of the feminine for about 40 years now or more, 50 years maybe even, and that's true. But the birth of the re-energized feminine has taken the form of the masculine. Women have had to get stronger and work harder and take on more responsibilities and take positions that were formerly only available to men. So that's been a big shift. But there is some fluidity in, but it's not the typical feminine. It's not what you would see as Venusian, really. The early in the corporate executive power, even now when you see women in Congress or in roles of power in the world and authority, they're wearing suits. They're not looking really feminine. They're dressed up like men, only in women's clothing a little bit. And so I think we're changing, and we're in the shift right now. We're in the gender fluidity is very much a part of the Gemini star point that we're in. And there's a whole culture now alive that doesn't want to be considered male or female or labeled that way. They want to be both. They are both. They consider themselves more fluid that way. They do not want a binary gender society. So I think a lot of that is part of it, and we'll see how that keeps progressing. But yeah, we are moving towards the rebirth of the feminine in a different way.
Well, I hope that when the Libra and Pisces star points come in, we'll have better music as well.
Better what?
Better music.
Oh, yeah. I've always thought that too. the best music is with Pisces and Libra, and and Taurus, and yeah, when we had that period before, when they were together on the star before, we had amazing music. It was classical music that we're still playing now. And also there was a brief period in the 60s, from the mid 60s to the early 80s, or really the mid 60s to about the mid 80s, where there were two air signs on the star. We had Aquarius and Gemini together before Aquarius phased out and when Gemini had just been born. And we had the best music. I mean, I might be biased about that because that is the generation of music I grew up in. But I think, people like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan and on and on and on and on. You can name all the great music that came out in that period. And I just don't see any other period of music since then that has topped it.
Well, we're going to have a preview, right? When the Libra StarPoint comes in later in 2022, we're going to have Gemini and Libra. Yeah.
I think start listening for a change in tone of the music.
Fingers crossed. So, yeah.
And then what do we got next? So what will the Libra star bring us? I looked back to the last Libra star point, 1771 to 1880. It lasted over 100 years. And we had the twin star points of Libra. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, a morning star, and Susan B. Anthony, a Libra evening star. And they together formed the National Women's Suffragette Association, helping to push the right to vote to be granted to women. It took 50 years for the women's vote to happen in the United States, but they were the ones who pioneered it. And so it is, Libra comes back to the scales of justice and equality in terms of, at that time, gender equality. And the first step in that was giving women the right to vote. So we'll see what comes in the next Libra star, but I'm very hopeful that there's going to be more laws regarding equality. We shouldn't even have to pass laws that say we're equal because it should be a basic human right. But Libra will pretty much make sure that it's going to happen.
I also noticed that the last time over this period when the women's suffrage was active, right now we are having that Me Too movement.
Right.
So you reckon it'll be even more of the escalation of the Me Too movement, women coming out and say, no, you don't treat women like that, be it at the workplace or, even if you're the boss or something.
17,
things around.
Let's look at 1770, for instance, or 1771, 72, when we had, well, let's just say 1770. I did some other research that isn't really a part of the Venus star, but Chiron was in Aries in 1770 for this event. 50 years later, women actually got the vote in 1920, and that was another Chiron and Aries period. 50 years after that, it was 1970, and the first large-scale modern women's lib movement happened. And 50 years after that, we got to 2020, and we have the Me Too movement taking, front and center stage. So every 50 years, when Chiron goes into Aries, which is a Martian sign, but Chiron is the wounded healer and showing the wound of the masculine run world, or the toxic elements of, too much masculinity and power, is when the women rise up and something happens. I thought that was funny for Chiron and Aries periods, but it makes sense when you think about it. because it just been every 50 years, like clockwork, the next big step has occurred. So the Venus Star Point is a lot to think about and learn, but I do have a course. If you already know astrology and you have a good basic understanding of the chart, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to absolute beginners, but if you know your chart and the planets and the signs and so forth and how they connect pretty well, and you want to study this more, I do have a course available at my website. And there's a syllabus of the whole course. This is just part one, but there's actually 4 parts to it. And Donny, by the way, is a graduate of that course and is also one of my certified Venus Star Point teachers and practitioners. So I want to give a shout out here now to Donny, who did excellent on his exam and has become a very strong voice in promoting the Venus Star Point work, and I definitely appreciate you for that, Donny.
First in Southeast Asia, you mentioned.
These are some of my other books, Mythic Astrology, 2 volumes of them. They're also available at the website. And these are the Venus Star books. One is an ebook. It's an abridged version of the print book, which has all the charts and graphs and everything, diagrams in them. This is a little bit smaller and more condensed, but it's got still packed with some good information. And this was my hope back in 2005 when I was writing a lot about the Venus Star Point, was that our next star date was October 22nd, 2022, which is now just around the corner. And I thought with the retreat of Mars-ruled signs and the ascendancy of Venus-ruled signs, we could anticipate a world that is ready for peace, a world that is perceived as safer and more beautiful, and a healthier planet on which to reside. And anyway, I will hold that thought and hope that we can get there.
We all need that, you know. So let me just share what I have, because I'll be doing more of the application and just piggybacking off some of the points that Arielle mentioned earlier in the presentation. So pertaining to a morning star Venus star point, basically there will be an increased likelihood to have something manifesting in the arena of affairs and decisions of the state, politics, law, and governance, even more so in the sign of Capricorn, because Capricorn talks about government, world powers, and civilization, for that matter. And I've actually dragged out celebrities who are born under the Capricorn Venus star point. And that means those that's born in 1986 and 1990 mostly. Those are the ones I've listed here. So the first bullet point are all the female celebrities. And the second bullet point are all the male celebrities that are born under the Capricorn Venus star point. What's really intriguing is that, for example, we take Megan Fox, like she's in the movie like Transformers, the really pretty one, and she's got her natal Venus star point trining her sun, which is on the fixed star Algol. And one of the key phrases that Algol represents, besides, although it's usually known as the pretty negative in meaning, as most astrologers talk about, but fixed star Algol can also mean exquisite beauty, almost mannequin-like. And she does look like as if like she's perfect in a lot of ways. In terms of her looks, like her facial bone structure, everything. Bones is ruled by Capricorn and Saturn as well. So her facial features are very defined. And let's look at the next example, which is Amber Heard. She's got her natal Venus star point trining Venus and Black Moon Lilith. And these two, Venus and Black Moon Lilith, are also on the fixed star Algol. And Black Moon Lilith, one of the keywords of Black Moon Lilith is controversy. So we all know what happened between her and Johnny Depp. It's very controversial. There's a lot of mudslinging back and forth. And how that divorce go down, it was just a complete mess. And let's look at Lindsay Lohan as well. For her, her natal Venus star point is opposing her first and fourth house ruler, Mercury, in early Leo. And Leo rules partying. And we all know Lindsay Lohan as the party girl, who probably drank too much. And then the problems that kind of occurred in her life because of the excessive partying. But since Mercury rules her first and fourth house, maybe that's her coping mechanism for a very painful or messy family dynamic that she grew up in.
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a coping mechanism. So the next one is Kirsten Stewart. That's in Arielle's slides earlier. And her natal Venus star point actually activates her natal Jupiter and Saturn opposition. That's in her second and eighth house natal axis. And Jupiter rules her seventh house of partnerships, and Saturn rules her ninth house and midhaven in that matter. So probably one of the most infamous thing that she's done is to sleep with an elder director. In this case, the Rupert Sanders, who's the director of Snow White and the Huntsman. That's while she was still with Robert Pattinson, and we know how that ended up. They split, and then people were like shading her, you know, for like, how can you do this to Robert? All those things. And let's look at the guys now, the male celebrities. And Armie Hammer, he used to be in the movie The Social Network, and also J. Edgar as well. For him, his natal VSP actually forms a quincunx or inconjunct, which is 150 degrees aspect to his first and fourth house ruler, Mercury, that's in the third house of text messages, and in the sign of Leo, which is love affairs. So what happened was his leaked text messages regarding his twisted sexual preferences and affairs got out on social media, which is a very third house thing. And later on, it's found out that it's actually a behavior learned from male figures in his early years, which are the father and grandfather, which is represented by the first and fourth house, in which Mercury actually rules. And third house is also about giving interviews, and he tends to overshare about his love and sex life in interviews that kind of like blew his cover away. And we've got also another very good looking dude, which is Liam Hemsworth. And he's got his natal VSP conjunct his Venus and his sextile Black Moon Lilith. So when I think of Black Moon Lilith, I think of Miley Cyrus. Because they were married, and for him in the relationship, he's almost like the very like straight-laced guy. And because they're talking about Capricorn VSP, he's also serving as kind of like a father figure to her as well. It's almost like he's got that I can fix her kind of energy that kind of defines their marriage while they're together. And last but not least, we've got a singer, Sean Kingston, and his natal VSP in Capricorn trines his natal moon on Algol, again, that fixed star. And his breakout song was Beautiful Girls. So I find it very uncanny. And for the deep dive of Capricorn VSP celebrity, I've actually chosen Lady Gaga. And if we think about the word lady, Capricorn refers to those who are on top. Hence, I asked the question earlier, like, does it refer to royals as well? Which it does. And we've got a lady, but she's called Gaga. And the name actually came from the Queen song Radio Gaga. And this was pitched to her via a music producer who collaborated and dated her. And if we use derivative houses, where her VSP, natal Venus star point, actually sits in Capricorn, 8th house, we can use derivative houses, and is the 3rd house from the 5th. 5th house is stage, 3rd house is name. So 3rd from the 5th is 8th house. That's her stage name, Lady Gaga. And the ruler Saturn, in her case, somehow is connected to the 10th house of authority figures or career-related stuff. And it's also connected to her moon in the 5th house of romance. So how this name came about is someone pitched to her, and who's that person in her life is someone who's in an intimate work and romantic relationship. And this is where she inherited the legacy, 8th house, her stage name in this case. And I've also written some short little delineation for someone who's got a natal VSP in Capricorn, because they are really about being the boss, which is Capricorn. Hence, I said something earlier regarding being the CEO of your own destiny. There's very much Capricorn VSP energy. But then it's not all the time that they are very grown, I would say, because the Capricorn VSP actually connects to the Leo VSP. So sometimes they may let that teenager within them come out at times. And what I find really interesting is that since we're talking about that Capricorn VSP that feeds into the Leo VSP, a famous Leo that we know is Madonna. And Madonna has got Venus, Neptune, Pluto that's in aspect to her natal VSP. And true enough, Lady Gaga did cite Madonna as one of her main influence, but we all know Madonna, what she talks in, how she talks in interview. And she was just dissing her. And she even mentioned that Lady Gaga's got a hit song that very closely resembles her own. So, but having said that, that didn't deter Gaga from working super hard and committing to her craft to build her own legacy, because her natal Capricorn VSP is in her 8th house of legacy. So it's almost like the extra drive to be the boss of her own destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, what I'd like to say, Donny, here is that what strikes me about that association that she has mentioned Madonna being a strong influence in her career, because of course, when she first came out, that was what a lot of people thought, just in, you know, how her stage presence and her costumes and her unique way of presenting herself and outrageous way did kind of mirror Madonna's doing that back in the 80s when she burst upon the scene. Madonna's an Aquarius star point, and Lady Gaga is a Capricorn star point, which is the continuation of the Aquarius star point. So they actually are twin stars, but of a different generation.
Yeah, because the star points swing backwards in the zodiac, right? Yeah, from Aquarius.
Yeah, because Madonna's star point is about 8 degrees Aquarius, and Lady Gaga's is about what, 26 Capricorn?
29. She's the first.
29. Okay,
Yeah.
So it's closer even. She's the first of the Capricorn star points. So they actually have a pretty close, closer conjunction of their two star points, you know?
And if her birth time is correct, and Madonna's natal Venus star point is at 8+ degrees of Aquarius, it sits on her 9th house cusp, someone she looks up to.
Yeah.
Yeah, those 9th house.
Yeah. Yeah. A teacher, a kind of a role model.
It's like it's almost like she sees Madonna as the guru of like this music industry. She's got it like figured out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And okay, let's talk about something a bit darker, because Lady Gaga has revealed that she was actually raped when she was younger, before she turned 21. I think it happened around age 19 to 20. And since this Capricorn Venus star point, Venus is kissing Pluto 3 times. Let's deep dive a little bit into some uncomfortable territories. And I've actually looked at the period, because that when I read news articles, there wasn't like a defined period when that happened. So I look at 2 transit Venus star points to kind of paint a picture, like the shift of what's going on with her when she encountered whatever she encountered back then. So let's look at the one that happened before, which is an Aries Venus star point at 10 degrees 31 minutes at age 19 when it happened, because that's when she mentioned in later interviews that she had been raped and she had undergone mental and physical therapy. And she also suffered from PTSD as well. So I basically located where 10 degrees 31 minutes of Aries is, that transit Venus star point location. And then I just located what does 10 degrees 31 minutes of Aries actually aspect in her natal chart. And it's something very telling. First of all, it's very clear that 10 degrees 31 minutes of Aries actually is connected to the Scorpio Venus star point, which here includes her moon and Pluto. And moon and Pluto is the classic configuration of someone having PTSD, for that matter. And she also mentioned earlier this year in 2021 regarding the additional details pertaining to her rape. And she did say her rapist dropped her off pregnant on a corner at my parents' house because I was vomiting, sick, and being abused. This is exact quote from the interview. And I was locked away in a studio for months. When I actually look at 10 degrees of Aries, how it's actually aspecting in her chart, it actually highlights that Chiron in the 12th house of being locked away, opposing Saturn in the 6th. So this thing could be happen at work because of that 6-12 house relationship. And it also, Queen Concerts.
Also, yeah, the moon.
It also in conjunction or form a 150-degree aspect with the moon, which is something to do with like fertility, you know, and it's happening in the 5th house of having a child. So she was pregnant. And it also trines, or because that point also trines that Saturn is someone older, Saturn, authority. And her Saturn is in the 6th house. So it happened at work. So the part whereby she said she was locked up in the studio for a month, there's a very, very much Chiron in the 12th house energy for her. And that Saturn also squares Jupiter in the 9th house. So this kind of tells me that, and Jupiter is in the sign of music, Pisces, while she's on a music project, for that matter. And her Jupiter is in the 10th house of career. So she's doing something for her career when all this happened. Yeah, so it got pretty dark pretty fast. Sorry, guys. And let's move on to the next transit Venus star point, because each Venus star point by transit, as Arielle mentioned, lasts for 9.5 months approximately. So I got to look at what's happening after that. And do notice that the two Venus star points, one is in Aries, one is in Capricorn. These are these two signs in which Mars function very well in. So there's something to do with something very Martian going on. And if I were to look at one of the meanings of Mars, it can mean something sexual or taken by force, which is also Mars as well, by the way. And for this transit Venus star point at 23 degrees 40 minutes of Capricorn, is a morning star. And this is in her 8th house. And it forms a very close in conjunct to this asteroid called Nessus. When we talk about asteroid Nessus, wherever or when it shows up in someone's chart, we all have that as some part of our chart. It actually represents where do we feel we are abused. And this can be verbal, physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, sexual, in all ways. And that Nessus point actually represents someone that's taking what they want, in this case from her, with no thought or feeling for the other, for her welfare, in this example. And her Nessus is ruled by the sun, because the sun rules Leo, and the sun is actually exalted in Aries. In the 11th house, pardon for the typo, and the sun here is ruled by Mars, which is exalted at 0 degrees of a cardinal sign. 0 degrees of a cardinal sign is a very powerful point because it's where the seasons change as well. So she is being abused by someone really powerful who's in the music industry, in which she's not naming up to today. Maybe she's scared she will be cancelled because of that thing, but hence I asked earlier to Arielle whether, like, when the Libra VSP comes along, whether the Me Too movement will take an escalation upwards. Maybe she'll be one of the people who actually give a name to her perpetrator and rapist, for that matter. And Nessus in her natal 3rd house, since it's activated or highlighted by that transit Venus star point, is also trining her Venus in the 11th house. And also forms a trine to Uranus as well. So it forms like a grand fire trine in this case. And this can actually imply some kind of shame and trauma and mental health and PTSD stemming from that sexual assault and abuse in this case, because we do have Uranus, Venus, and Nessus. In that combination, it can mean something quite traumatic, actually. And if we go by the house rulerships that's involved and where they actually sit in, it very clearly represents her experience of being locked away for months in the studio by an older male music producer or executive. That's the most that she will talk about or name, just short of naming him. And what's really interesting as well is that the first time she actually talked about what happened to her this way was back in 2014. And this was when there was a transit Venus star point and a morning star phasal return in the sign of Capricorn for her. Because it also lands back in her natal 8th house, which talks about trauma and crisis, all those things. That's when she opened up.
And this is the next phase of that star point return for her.
Yeah, so I do see like there's some moving forward, hopefully with her, because until now she still have, she did admit that she still got thoughts of self-harming herself because she never quite got over that part of her life until today. Yeah. So let's wish her the best. And Arielle also mentioned something about 18 degrees of a sign that's really emphasized over this Capricorn Venus star point. And I've looked at a few world leaders because they are ruled by Capricorn, of course. And one of them is Putin. And this current or soon to be Venus star point at 18 degrees 40 over minutes of Capricorn will be very tightly opposing his Uranus that's happening in the 9th house of foreign affairs. And then it's forming like a T-square if I widen the orb a bit, because the natal VSP will be here in his 3rd house, and it's going to complete and make a T-square to his natal Saturn, Neptune, and also Mercury in the 12th house. So I wonder if, because he has been assassinated before, so I wonder if how many more lives does he have? More than a cat? 2 cats maybe? All this 12th house energy is very like insidious behind the scenes. Although I must say that there's a trine going on from that transit Venus star point to Jupiter in the 7th house. So there can be like a saving grace that he might be able to escape things. But the attempts to like kind of get rid of him is still there. That's what I see over here. And the last
what's that upside down Pluto next to natal Pluto in the 10th?
It's something like an asteroid, yeah. Because I've plotted the asteroids in so it can be a bit busy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I've highlighted those in green, that those will be like activated, yeah, by the natal Venus star point, the planets only, yeah. Because sometimes I also look into asteroids, like for Lady Gaga, I mentioned Nessus. Like if I never plot that asteroid, I was not able to see the abuse that's going on in her life. And that sweet little point just described everything, what's going on with her. And we also have something from the royal family, because since Capricorn rules royals, we got to look at what's happening with the royal family. And I suppose with the Capricorn VSP, usually I see a transfer of power in the UK and USA as well, with that going on. So let's look at Queen Elizabeth. And the transit Venus star point will be at around 18 to 19 degrees of Capricorn. So you can see from her natal chart that she's got South Node and Ascendant there. So it's lining up pretty close with that. And if I were to apply eclipses and also transits, is even more telling, because we've just got a lunar eclipse at 27 Taurus in November. That's really close to her 4th house cusp over here. And in the middle of May of next year, we've got another lunar eclipse that's going to be happening at 25 degrees of Scorpio. So 4th and 10th house activation, and the star point that's active is lining up with her 1st house, her ascendant, and also South Node. And I've also checked out by transits as well. In the middle of March, the South Node will actually transit her midheaven and Saturn. And Saturn rules her body again, 1st house ruler. And Saturn also rules the 12th house in seclusion, being away from the public, be it voluntarily or involuntarily. And at the same time, middle of March, when South Node is transiting here, transit Saturn is also triggering her Mars and Jupiter in her 1st house. I'm using Placidus house system and using the true notes as well, in case people ask. And if I were to add all these things together, she might be stepping back from her position as the queen. That's what I can see. And so who's next in line? Charles. Since the critical degree here when the VSP is at 18-ish, 19 degrees of a sign, the first thing that jumped out at me in Prince Charles's chart is that series, which refers to mother, and is in his first house. It's very close to conjunct Pluto. So using the chart of Prince Charles, I wonder if something very crisis-ridden is going to happen to the Queen. Because Ceres does rule the mother figure in his life, which is the Queen.
And Ceres and Pluto can be the loss of the mother, the separation from the mother, as in the myth.
And then the grief that comes along with it. And if I were to widen the orb a little bit, that transit VenusStarPoint at 18 to 19 degrees of Capricorn also squares his Venus as well, which is the 4th house ruler. Also represents mother. So yeah, it kind of repeats itself. So let's look at the elder son of Prince Charles, which is Prince William. And for Prince William, if I were to locate where 18 degrees, 43 minutes of Capricorn is, it actually fits into his first house, his first natal house. But there seems to be nothing much lining up in terms of zodiacal degree at 18 to 19. But however, what's very interesting is that he's got Jupiter at 0 degrees in Scorpio. And we are going to have one that's coming in 2026. I think there may be something him coming into power that when that transit VenusStarPoint hits 0 Scorpio.
2026. For 2022, the star point will be 1 degree from his Jupiter, but by 2026, it'll be right on it. So it's between those years, 22 and 26. Yeah.
He could come to power earlier. I mean, since you mentioned that it's less than 1 degree. So that could be, if I were to put all these things together, something tells me that the Queen will be stepping back. Prince Charles actually he won't be on the throne for long, and then William will take over. That's the kind of thing that I got. And so let's move on to the US. 18 degrees, 43 minutes of Capricorn. Do I see anything that's aspecting that point? The 4th and 10th house cusp is at 19 degrees, so it's close to aspect that. And that transit VenusStarPoint is happening in his 2nd house of how he recharges his energy. So what that tells me is that he may not be able to recharge his energy to kind of handle being the president, 10th house. Maybe he feels weakened by the whole process of it as well. And let's look at his choice of vice president. Kamala's chart is actually a bit more, her chart actually lights up with the upcoming transit VenusStarPoint, I must say. When the Libra one swings around at 29 degrees, it's a critical degree, 29 in Libra in October of 2022. This will sit very close to her Sun and Mercury, and Mercury is her ascendant ruler. So something's happening to her that lights up. And the Sun, as we know, represents the president in mundane astrology. So I wonder if in 2022, she have a chance to like go up the ranks for that matter. One last thing I want to mention is that since this Venus retrograde is kissing Pluto 3 times, Pluto actually represents nuclear things. And I've actually pulled up the Islamic Republic of Iran chart and see how 18 degrees 43 minutes of Capricorn, what it actually lights up in the in the national chart of Iran. And true enough, the North Node, Pluto in Iran's chart, and also Uranus in Iran's chart are highlighted in those degrees. And Pluto actually rules anything that's behind the scenes, 12th house. So this makes me wonder if there'll be some kind of developments going on with the nuclear deal going on in Iran over this Capricorn VenusStarPoint period. And I've actually plotted the birth of this Capricorn VenusStarPoint onto a map, which I won't show here because it can be too much for people. But in short, I do see that there are some lines that's cutting right across Iran, and there are some lines cutting across Washington, D.C. as well. So I wonder if, with that said, there'll be some kind of negotiations going on pertaining to that. So that, just look out in the news for this, because it is just uncanny that, you know, they've got Pluto at 18 degrees as well, which is forming like a close to SX square to that transit VenusStarPoint, which is in Iran's second house, which is like resources and possessions. So something regarding that to think about. And I think I've zipped through all the charts super fast. And that's what I think 2022, this transit VenusStarPoint will bring for us in Capricorn. Yeah. A whole lot of developments on the global political scale. So it'll be one that's very eventful, I would say, and it will be on the news a lot. So if you want to detach from it, please do. Because I think with this past 18 months with the North Node in Gemini, we've just been bombarded by information, or what's perceived as facts.
Yeah.
Whether they are truth, South Node in Sagittarius, I'll leave it to you guys to find out.
Yeah, that's a good point. The North Node's coming into Taurus, so it's time for pleasure and sensuality and getting into a more Venusian way. It's an Earth sign, the node. I noticed the nodes have been tracking the VenusStar cycle also, because it's 1.6 years. It's about the same when the node shifts signs as when the VenusStar point has another retrograde. And another beginning of a new cycle, because I think just preceding the last VenusStar point is when the nodes went into Gemini and Sagittarius from Capricorn and Cancer, and so we had that. We had that double Gemini going on,
and also Black Moon Lilith did conjoin the North Node in Gemini, and Black Moon Lilith, one of the key phrases is slut shaming, and so we apply in the Gemini way, which is like your viewpoints versus my viewpoints. If you don't agree with my so-called facts, what I deem as facts, then you'll be slut shamed, which is Black Moon Lilith's key phrase as well. So there's a lot of like.
The other thing I noticed for the beginning of the pandemic was the goddess Hygeia, the goddess of health and well-being, was in Gemini, and you know, the whole in the whole first few months of the pandemic, it was, everybody was wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. It was Hygeia, Gemini rules the hands. When they thought this was going to be the way to prevent, you know,
the spread. But Hygeia is also like ruling sanitary. She's the sanitary goddess. So yeah, like, why people can't keep their hands off toilet paper rolls.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was a real scramble for toilet paper as well.
I was like,
which I found bizarre, but
you know what? People have asked me, why does the sky archetypal gods are so eerily or readily manifesting on the earth plane? I actually attribute it to Uranus and Taurus. Uranus meaning the archetypal energies, which are, you know, Uranus is also ruling the sky gods, and
It's
Uranus
the
is
sky god. Yeah.
and Uranus is transiting the sign of Gaia.
Yeah.
So as above, so below, is very literal.
Right.
I know everything is like, we talk about hygiene, literally people are going for sanitary stuff and they're fighting over it. Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you, Arielle. It's been a very
You're
fruitful
welcome. It was
discussion.
nice connecting with you and doing all this VenusStar exchange.
Yes, there's probably more to cover, but you know, depending whether there's part 2 to this interview, maybe you guys can leave it in the comments section below.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your comments and feedback on the VenusStarPoint, and of course, would love to have you join our VenusStarPoint global family of practitioners and teachers.
Yes, I must say that taking that course with Aries probably like it opens up this whole new way of looking at your chart. And you can also add that VenusStarPoint technique of reading your charts into your personal arsenal on top of like the usual like transits, progressions, solar arcs, whatever. Like this one will be a useful like useful technique to add on top of that. Yeah, in which I've been using that for my Venus readings as well. So till next time then, Arielle. I know you have to go to.
It was wonderful to be with you today, Donny. Thank you for the opportunity.
So,
and bye to everybody out there.
Yeah, so take care over this Capricorn VenusStarPoint.